Okay, we're using their spare labor. So I'm assuming, that might make an ass out of you. I mean, I'm pretty sure the Bay Area stats.
Well, what happens when you say, I presume? Then you make a spin-off of that, a spoof of that. Okay, Mark, we received an email for you. That's question is, are your loans assumable?
So is a hard money loan assumable, or a private money loan? Are they assumable? Well, the interesting thing about the loans we make are that, like a bank loan, the deed of trust that secures that loan does say by default that it's due on sale.
Right.
And that's just really boilerplate. But for practical purposes, it depends, of course. Most of the loans we write are short term. I mean, the majority of the loans we're writing right now are to real estate investors who are buying property to fix and flip.
With an exit strategy.
With the exit strategy is to sell the property and pay off the loan, within a year. But I got a call last week from someone who I made a loan to about a year ago. She needed a loan on property that she was converting in Bolinas to a bed and breakfast. And so we gave her a 3-year loan and at a fairly conservative loan to value based on the appraised value at the time. Investor likes the loan. The borrower made a go at it and called me and said, I'm thinking of selling the property and I just want to know if I can offer that if needed.
Can someone assume the loan?
Yeah, can someone assume the
loan? It's still short term. It's not like it's a 30-year loan.
Right, it's not a 30-year loan. And essentially what I told her was, well, probably, there would be, I would charge a fee because I'd have to do some paperwork. So, and banks generally, when they allow an assumption, you figure it's 1 point or 1% of the loan amount would be like probably the minimum fee. So, but what I would do is I would call the lender and ask him, are you interested in keeping this loan as security, and are you enjoying the rate?
But I would consistently paying late.
Right, sure. And I would take an application from the buyer. So really the answer is that we really have a lot of flexibility in this industry. There aren't any fast, hard written rules. I mean that's really the best part about a hard money / private money loan is that we have the ultimate flexibility.
The makes sense element of it.
Right. Well, there's a lot of subjectivity that goes into making our loans. I mean, if I which is why I need to talk to the borrower over the phone at the least, if not meet them in person, because a lot of us in this business make a judgment call on whether to make a loan or not just by the vibe we get and the feeling we get in a conversation and talking to somebody. They sound like someone who knows what they're doing, has business sense, is going to make the payments, what's their background, what's their experience, all that kind of stuff. That it plays into this. So there's a lot of things we do. We don't, we're not allowed to discriminate because that's illegal, but we can be discriminating in our decision. Discerning, right. I guess that's more proper. So anyway, we have the ultimate flexibility when we do these types of loans.
Well, here's the other thing is that, the question specifically asked about being assumable, but the other part of it could have been when the loan comes due. Does it automatically mean that it comes due? Yes, it does. However, you can do an extension.
Yeah, you can ask for an extension, and we do extensions all the time. They're just basically called a loan modification agreement. We say, you need another 12 months? Okay, well, you thought you were going to get bank financing. Now, I'll tell you, a lot of the loans we did 2 years ago, and we did a lot of 24-month loans for people who were collecting property long-term for rental income, and now they're due. 2 years later, they thought, well, we'd get a bank loan and refinance. Well, the banks still have yet to kind of come back into that rental market.
The technical question, is that a loan modification or is it just an extension?
It's odd because it changes the terms.
Well, the technical term is a forbearance. So anytime you change the terms of a loan, it's called a forbearance agreement. Although when some people hear the word forbearance, they oftentimes think, well, I can stop payment or foreclose. Yeah, it doesn't sound like a friendly word, but an extension or a loan modification agreement, whatever you want to call it, the answer is we don't just generally drop the hammer and start foreclosing on a property just because the loan comes due. If you've been a good payer and there's usually it's rental property, there's lease income, so that means the lease payment is servicing the monthly loan payment.
Right.
The investor who invested in that loan, he's getting a great return. He's not likely to get a better return. If anything, he might have been in a loan 2 years ago where he's making 10%, where if I put him in a new loan today, he may only get 9 or even 8%. So he might think, well, hey, if they're still want to pay the same rate, I'd love to go another 12 or 24 months.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing too, because the underlying asset is what it is. Unlike I'm trying to draw an analogy here. You look at a car lease. Let's say you want to keep the car. Well, the dealership can't really do that because of the cap or the residual rate of the car.
Sure. Yeah.
It changes the value because you have a depreciating asset.
Yeah.
Whereas in real estate, if you've still got the person willing to pay, you still have the value underneath it, and it makes sense. Why not?
Well, here's the other thing, is that potentially you may decide not to release the borrower and just have a new person come in as an additional borrower. You can do that, right?
Oh, in the case of an assumption.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. It's like, sure, we'll let you assume, but we're not letting you off the hook. So now you get an additional...
Oh, now you have additional
Having an
security.
additional
Yeah,
guarantor is
right.
always
Exactly.
nice on these deals.
That's always nice. Okay, Robert, we got a very sophisticated question here from a listener.
And I'm going to bow out right at you.
Because we have very intelligent listeners here. And I'm going to ask the question, and before you answer it, I'm going to give a quick little explanation that I
Sure.
had to look up here. Okay, here was the question. What I would like to hear is HARP 3 or ARP options for people who have loans that aren't Fannie or Freddie and are underwater.
Right.
Now, the HARP, it's not HARP marks, it stands for Home Affordable Refinance Program. It's a U.S. government-backed mortgage program for homeowners whose homes have lost value since purchase. HARP was first launched in early 2009 and has since helped more than 2 million U.S. homeowners get access to today's low mortgage rates.
Correct.
Go ahead, take it away now.
Okay, so that I understand what you would like to hear. Unfortunately, I don't have any clear direction to provide you on what would happen for loans that are not, where the investor, I should say, is not Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac. So let's make a distinction at the beginning. The investor on the loan could be different than the servicer of the loan. The servicer of a loan could be a company like Ceteris or Aquen or something like that. They collect your payments. But the underlying security has, well, the loan has been securitized and it's owned by Fannie and Freddie. And if you meet certain criteria, which you can certainly call me and ask, and I'd be happy to provide, what we do is we look at the mortgage statement, we determine if the loan is owned by Fannie and Freddie, and then if it meets certain criteria, it must have been originated before a certain date, etc., you would be eligible for the HARP program, and that will allow owners who are underwater to refinance into better terms. We've done a number of those loans over the last couple of years, very beneficial. But if you're out of Fannie and Freddie, unfortunately, you don't have a lot of good options. There's been a lot of talk lately about how do these people who are in negatively amortizing loans or loans that never touched Fannie and Freddie, what do they do? And the industry as a whole does not have a comprehensive and consistent solution for them, unfortunately. So they're still hopefully waiting to recapture some of the value that we've seen come up in the last year. A lot of people are now able to refinance out because they're no longer underwater. But those are your real solutions. Talk with a mortgage professional, get to the bottom of it, and then develop a strategy. That's the best advice I can give on those, unfortunately.
Well, it's a nice,
Yeah.
honest answer.
Yeah, I mean, you just don't have an equivalent HARP for things that are not Fannie and Freddie.
Okay. But if they are Fannie and Freddie,
If they are Fannie and Freddie, yeah, you're in. Most likely, you're in business. I still have to qualify for the loan, but a lot of things can be different. There's also some distinctions between servicer to servicer. So let's say you have a Wells Fargo loan and you go back to Wells. That has one set of HARP criteria. If you go Wells to a third party, that has another set. One is not better than the other. One might fit better than the other for your scenario. So again, something to discuss with a mortgage professional and get to the bottom of.
and that mortgage professional could be
Yeah.
Robert Spinoza. How do people get a hold of you?
Thanks, Edward. I'd be happy to help. There's no cost or obligation to figure that thing out. So don't ever have anybody tell you, oh, you've got to pay to do this. It's an easy thing you can do on your own. I can coach you through it.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're going to cut to our third and final commercial break. Here's the trivia question. In which TV series did David Carradine play a monk in the Wild West? The first, remember that from the 1970s? Don't touch that down because we're going to have some closing comments on the best of investing. Weed hopper. Welcome back to The Best of Investing. I'm Edward Brown, your host, along with Mark Hans and Robert Spinoza. When we cut to the third and final commercial break, we asked this trivia question. In which TV series did David Carradine play a monk in the Wild West?
Grasshopper.
That's right, but that's not the name of the show, Grasshopper.
Kung Fu.
Kung Fu, yes.
job.
We used to call him Weed Hopper. Yes. Actually, there was a little spoof on that one time.
You smoked too much of that.
No, no. No, it was a Saturday Night Live, I think, and they called him, Weed Hopper. Okay. Mark, you had some interesting statistics for us here.
Well, I just loved when I saw this graphic come out in one of the blogs I read regularly. Any regular listener to this show may recall hearing me, talk about how much I don't like the use of the median price index, and because
Right.
really when you read any article in the newspaper, and particularly let's just talk about the last 3 or 4 months, that we've been hearing and reading that real estate prices have gone up dramatically,
Right.
20-25% in some markets. And when you read the article, what they're always talking about is the median price.
Sometimes condos excluded.
Right.
Yeah,
Sometimes
so you know,
That's a good point.
Yeah.
And what I've always said is what makes that median price increase misleading is that it's based on the mix and types of homes that are selling at a particular point in
Right.
time. So here's a graphic that shows the percentage of distressed versus non-distressed sales county by county, and they've got a small graph here that says if you take the 5 counties in California that had the largest percentage of distressed sales, you would look at a year ago, in May of 2012, 70% of those sales were distressed. In May of 2013, of all sales, only 44% are
Okay.
distressed. So you've got a huge decline
Right.
in the percentage of distressed sales. Now in the top 5 counties that have the smallest percentage of distressed sales, that includes San Francisco and Marin and Santa Clara, in May of 2012, of all sales, 40% were distressed sales. In May of 2013, 15%
Right.
are distressed sales. So now you're talking about homes, a larger share, significantly larger share year over year of homes are selling that are not distressed
Right.
sales. And
Right.
so, and we know, you and I know, Robert, anecdotally here, that where we live in Marin, a year ago, you couldn't sell high-end homes, you couldn't give them away,
Right, right.
and now there's a strong demand and they're selling. So,
Right.
so the median price has been skewed dramatically by the shift in the nature of the sales of homes. Because I'm going to sit here, and I know maybe one of our co-hosts who aren't here right now might disagree with me, but I know the house that I'm living in right now has not gone up in value 20% year over year. It just
Right.
hasn't. It's not
Right.
distressed, and I've not benefited from what I'm reading in the paper. So
Well, yeah, what happens when you get a $5 million house that went up
Well,
30%?
that's where I'm going, because
Yeah.
one of the things when the company that produced this report, it looks very similar to me to the DataQuick one that I look at all the time, the California City Chart. So if you look at Marin County, it might say that the median price increased, again, exclusive of condos, the median price increased 39% for year over year in the month of May. Let's say, for example. Okay, I don't know that that's a factual number, but and then you look at the actual breakdown in the county, and there may be one transaction that happened in Bolinas where the year before, or not Bolinas, but in Stinson, where the year before a house sold for $500,000 because there was only one sale, and then another one sold for 2.5. Well, it takes that percentage and factors it into the county median.
Yeah.
So that's going to skew things wildly. You see a smoothing when you have a larger county and more similar types of properties, but still, I think, Mark, it speaks to what you're getting at, which is the devil's in the details.
Well, all you can
can't-
do is say things are gooder than they were before.
Right.
things are definitely better. We have seen recovery in pricing in real estate. We have a shortage of properties based on demand. That's driving up prices. But when you read these articles about percentages, and then you read responses to these articles about are we in a bubble or we are in
Right.
a bubble, we're not in a bubble.
I agree with that.
I don't think we. Although are some homes trading today at what, let's just call it above market prices, although that's kind of silly if someone's willing to pay
Yeah, then it's not
more
really
than the
above
appraised
market.
value. It's not technically not above market, but I think I think there's a demand for housing that will cause people to maybe overpay for a home, and all things being equal. But that again is also a factor of, and maybe not so much today because rates have gone up quite a bit in the last couple of weeks. But certainly, a month ago, I think people, based on the affordability, were willing to, I'm going to get that house, I'll pay $100,000 over asking.
But one thing I was thinking about this morning, and I was commenting on my blog about it too, is the fact that, and Edward, maybe you can help out with this too, but let's look at a company's stock, okay? The company fundamentally may be the same company, but it could vary wildly in how much the stock price is.
Well, yeah, when you have a stock market crash, it's not like suddenly, IBM's worth that much less.
Correct. I remember
Or
2008
Apple,
talking about book value. I've never heard that term so much, right?
Yeah.
Book value. So people were trying to find the floor, but in real estate, you also have a component of that when you're talking about real estate bubbles and this mentality that people have, a herd mentality to push a price up. Let's not forget the fundamentals of that too, and I think that is at the core of this discussion about home price appreciation and the bubble topic itself, related to stock, and I think you get a better perspective on that.
Well, I think, I don't claim to have a good crystal ball. It certainly wasn't very shiny in 2007, so I have no reason to believe in 2013 my crystal ball is all that accurate. But it's really going to be interesting to see what happens to real estate in the next year, in the next 2 years. Are we going to continue to see low inventory and yet strong demand, which would equate potentially to continued rising prices, or are higher mortgage rates going to now temper that so that we're going to see a flat, or is it even possible that we could see a decline in some markets that might have gotten a little frothy, say San Francisco, Marin,
I
Santa
choose
Clara?
one of the above.
Well, I also think that Mark Zandi, he was making comments about the fact that I think that people underestimate the psychological shift with mortgage rates, and I think that's the thing to be aware of. If you are in the market right now for a home and you're looking at your mortgage rates and you've seen a recent increase, I think you have to circle the wagons and make sure that the math still works fundamentally.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think that real estate agents and economists perhaps underestimate the psychological effect of rates rising, because we have not been in a rising rate environment for the better part of a decade, and I think that unwinding that psychologically will have more implications than people know about.
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, it's not like the job market is expanding in the way that the government would like to see it. It's not like wages and salaries are increasing, and so now we've got the cost of housing going up, and what's going to happen? What happens if we see mortgage rates go up to what we talked about last week was the 40-year average of mortgage rates is 8%.
Right. You
What happens when we go back? I mean, we will see 8% mortgage rates again. We have to. I mean, it's just it just will happen.
I agree, and I think that you look at the overview of all that. Stepping back just a second to the other point you were getting at, but you need growth to fuel that, and our GDP numbers were underwhelming. So I mean, I think that this frenzy about what's going to happen with rates is perhaps a little overstated as well. I think that the economy has big significant issues that still need to be worked out. There are macroeconomic factors with baby boomers and all that kind of stuff, and how that actually plays out, I think impacts housing prices.
Yeah, rates can't just. I mean, it'll take a long time to go up to 8%.
I agree.
Yeah,
I'm
I
not
agree
saying
with
it's going to
that.
happen next year or
I agree
maybe
with that.
5 years, but I guess the point of it, and Robert, I appreciate very much what you say too, but there's so many variables and there's so much dynamism in the United States economy that
I agree.
things that we have no idea or something that may not even exist right now, a new product, a new technology could
The
drive,
internet.
right?
Or international
Something
chaos
could happen that could, for better or worse.
For better or worse.
Yeah, right. Something
Right.
could happen that could create, an amazing new quality of life or productivity
Correct.
or consumer wealth. So, I mean, it's just that's why I tend to be more of an optimist than a pessimist.
I am as well,
I tend to believe things will work their way out, and at the end of the day, and because I'm a real estate guy, I think real estate is always a good investment and will always be a good investment. And we're just having a lot of fun right now talking about the what if scenarios for what are the prospects
Right.
for the next year.
Yeah, and a couple of things on that too. I think that we're talking about a low rate environment, and we're in one. I believe we're going to stay in one for some time, but there are implications of changing that, and I think Japan is a good example of that too. I mean, you look at Japan's growth and its interest rates and its economy overall. That should serve as an example for us, and we have to be aware that removing the low interest rate environment is going to take some doing.
All right, thanks guys for your
You
thoughts, which moves us right to the thoughts for the day. Amateur boxer Joe Flanagan named his two sons Bob and Weave. Like that? Good thing he wasn't a golfer. He might have named one of his sons Putz. Okay, and drivers kill more deer than hunters. That's why I always hunt with my car instead of a rifle. Tune in next week to The Best of Investing. We're going to be giving away 9 more free vacations for answering trivia questions. Thanks for listening. On behalf of our team, I'm Edward Brown, wishing you the best of investing. So long. Today's special guest is Michelle Lerman. We've had her on before, but today she's going to be talking about year-end tax planning. And Michelle is an attorney certified by the California Board of Legal Specialization of the State Bar of California as a legal specialist in estate planning, trust, and probate law. She's been practicing for over 20 years, has published numerous articles on a wide range of estate planning topics, and is a much sought-after professional speaker. She was also selected for inclusion in the 2009 and 2010, I love this title, California Super Lawyers. You gotta love that one.
Super lawyer.
All right,
With
Michelle,
Kate.
yeah, welcome back to The Best of Investing.
Thank you.
All right, now let's get right into it because you gave us a lot of great topics to go over. So I'm going to let you just take it from here.
Well, estate planning is one of those areas of the law that really evolves. And if you don't stay up to date, you not only could get yourself into a lot of trouble, but you've actually missed some opportunities. So we're going to focus today about really the opportunities.
Okay.
What do people need to know?
And before the end of the show, I understand you're going to be giving a free report to our listeners.
That's right. We have a free report called What You Don't Know Can Hurt Your Family. 5 ways to make sure your children, wishes, and assets stay protected should something happen to you.
Okay. So one of the things here you had was 2011 Tax Act Must Know Basics.
Right,
Take
so
it away.
there's been huge changes in the law. So in 2011, we had a tax act that went into effect that's only going to apply until the end of next year. So
Okay.
created opportunities that starting January 1st in 2013 are going to end,
Okay.
unless additional legislation applies. So we're already December, so we basically have next year, unless something even changes sooner.
Now, there was something in 2010 that it was unlimited, the death, quote, the death
Right,
tax.
if you were fortunate enough to die in 2010,
Darn
your
it.
heirs didn't have to pay any estate taxes.
No, unfortunately I lived, so I didn't get the benefit of that, but or my heirs did.
I can't say you missed an opportunity. That would just
Not for that.
not be right.
No.
That would just not be right. But it's true, in 2010, someone could pass away without any estate tax at all. So George Steinbrenner, billionaires, a lot of wealth, people passed away and there were no estate taxes
Okay,
at
that
all.
was in 2010.
That was in 2010.
Okay.
In 2011, now the exclusion amount went to $5 million. But
that's still pretty
really,
high.
that's still pretty high, and that means as a couple, it could be $10 million. But the real news is that you can leave that while you're living.
Like through a gift tax?
Through a gift,
Or
and there's no gift tax on leaving that while you're living. So that's really the limited opportunity that people should be focusing on now, especially if you think that you're going to have a taxable estate upon your demise. I mean, think about it.
Yeah.
Property values are low, right?
Yeah.
Lower,
Why not
definitely.
lower? Definitely lower.
And
So why
possibly
not?
declining more.
And possibly declining more, but eventually, hopefully, going up.
Yes.
So why not transfer them now, free of gift tax, and let them grow and let all of that income go into the estate of your children or grandchildren?
Well, as I remember, the credit has been for either estate or gift. right?
Exactly.
So in theory, you could have, even years before, given away a lot of your assets and not had any tax because you would have used up the credit for gifting rather than estate.
That's true, but the key word is a lot.
That's
The word
true.
a lot, because what does a lot mean? Well, it used to be $1 million, and now it's $5 million.
Well, I know the IRS,
So that's the
a
big
lot
news.
is anything. They you know, it's
Right.
just, how much money did you make? Send it in, right?
So Michelle, when I think of estate planning, I think of, revocable trusts, and I come across them a lot. A lot of my clients that are who loan money to our company loan them through revocable trusts, et cetera. So if I set up a trust a number of years ago and maybe I haven't had it reviewed in a while, what are some of the things that I should be considering given some of these these changes you're talking about?
Well, the type of trust you need is going to depend on what the law is. So you can imagine that if the law used to be that you could only leave $1 million free of estate tax, that means for a married couple $2 million upon your demise. The type of trust you have, you can understand, is going to be a lot different than if now someone could leave $5 million and a couple could leave $10 million free of estate tax.
And is that gross, or do you get to take into consideration the liens against the
Oh,
property?
no, you get to take into consideration the liens. This is talking about your net
Your net, okay.
estate. So to answer your question, you really need to think about what type of trust do you need. I call it an I love you trust that says you and I are married, I love you, and I'm going to give everything to you when I die. Do
Right.
whatever you want with it.
Okay.
Do you want that kind of trust, or do you want the type of trust that says, I love you and I trust you and I want you to have everything upon my demise, but
I knew there was a but there
right,
somewhere.
but I want part of it to go in an irrevocable trust. Irrevocable meaning you can't marry Sue.
Yeah.
She's my little model that I always put when I speak. With the high boots and the mini skirt, and as a client recently said, he says, if something happens to my wife, I'm marrying the 18-year-old.
I thought it was Ashley.
Okay.
So what kind of trust do you want? And in the past, it's been very tax driven. You needed to have an irrevocable trust, even if you had a very modest estate, because if you left everything, this is really key, if you left everything in an I love you trust, and then your spouse later died, your estate could be subject to a lot of estate tax because you didn't have an irrevocable trust set up. So it used to be tax driven. Now that you've got a $5 million estate that can pass free of estate tax, $10 million for a married couple, we have to start thinking, do I need that irrevocable trust because I'm worried about my spouse marrying Sue?
Oh, that's a good point. I know that a lot of them were set up with life insurance and that sort of thing, but let me ask you, because this reminded me of when I asked about the gross versus the net. If you have a house or a rental property worth $1 million and you owe $1.5 million on it, do you get to still kind of take $500,000 away from the rest of your assets, or is it asset by asset? You know what I mean? Don't they take just the total gross versus everything you owe?
Yeah, no, it's the total net estate
Okay,
is
that's
what you're
good.
subject to estate tax. Plus, if you own something and you only own a fraction of it, you maybe have a partner, then the IRS is also frequently giving valuation discounts.
Absolutely,
So-
because trying to sell 10% of a property
Sure.
is not worth exactly 10% of the value.
Sure, but the IRS calculates their estate tax based on net. But still, you can imagine the type of trust you would have if someone hasn't reviewed their trust in a long time is very different under the current laws. But here's the problem. In only a year, the law is supposed to revert back to that $1 million exclusion. So now what kind of trust do I need?
Back to the irrevocable
Maybe.
one.
And so the biggest mistake that people make is thinking, well, I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to wait because I want to know what the law is. But
Yeah, because they may change it again.
They may
Yeah.
change it again,
Is this
but
the kind
you
of
need
question
a-
you ask your wife, how much do you love me? And plan ahead.
how much do you trust me?
Yeah,
I don't know if it's
yeah.
love.
That's really the best one. How much do you trust me? Yes.
Right.
So we got 3 weeks to the end of the year. What are some of the other things that you're suggesting your clients take into consideration for tax planning?
Well, the biggest thing I want people to look at now is whether they should make what's called annual exclusion gifts. So what we've been talking about is a lifetime exclusion. It's now called a basic exclusion amount, and that's the $5 million that you can leave. You can leave it upon your demise, you can leave it during your lifetime, but in addition to that, people can give unlimited amounts of what we refer to as annual exclusion gifts. Sometimes people think it's the $10,000, it actually went up to $12,000, now it's $13,000. And you can leave that to any person, as many people as you want. So often you
Oh, it
give
doesn't have to be family members.
It doesn't.
No,
It
I
doesn't.
remember that, and then
Yeah.
also your wife, like for us married people, your wife can also give
Right.
13,000. So if you give
So it doubles up.
26,000 basically
Right.
per
So,
person.
exactly, so your spouse can give it, and you can also give it to your children, you can give it to the in-law, you can give it to the grandchildren. So you can imagine that if you do that over and over, you've actually transferred a lot of wealth, especially if you do it with interest, say, in a partnership or something like that. You can either even
Doing
increase
10%
more.
per year.
Right,
Yeah.
whatever
Right,
the-
Right, you can
Just
discount
imagine
the
they-
value of property held in a partnership, so you
Right.
can actually gift
Yeah.
it
Gift
away
even more.
faster, yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
like I can imagine just the paperwork that needs. Here's our first trivia question. Remember, the theme is the old TV show MASH. The 8063rd was a neighboring MASH unit. What were the four numbers of the main MASH unit on the show? Well, welcome back to the Best of Investing. I'm Edward Brown, your host, and I'm in the studio here with Mark Hanf of Pacific Private Money and our guest, Michelle Lerman of Lerman Law Partners. And when we cut to the first commercial break, we asked this trivia question. The 8063rd was a neighboring MASH unit. Remember, the theme today is the old show MASH. What were the four numbers of the main MASH unit? And I understand we stumped our guests here.
Stump the co-host
So the
and the
co-host
guest.
and the guest. It was the 4077.
Oh, that's
now
right.
that's right. Remember.
I don't know, it was so long ago when I was watching all those reruns, now it's all Seinfeld.
Yes, exactly. Okay, Mark, you wanted to ask Michelle a couple of questions.
Yeah, on the sheet, Michelle, you gave us on notes that there's something in here about tuition and medical expenses. I didn't realize that there was an opportunity for some substantial estate savings when it comes to tuition. I know I've got a daughter that's visiting colleges all this year. Can you talk about that a little bit?
So we talked about the $5 million exclusion and the fact that you can leave that at your demise, and you can also gift that now. We talked about the annual exclusion, that you can actually give $13,000 to as many people as you want. I told people I'm available.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
$13,000,
Exactly.
I'm available. And in addition to that, you can also pay for tuition, for example, for college or medical expenses directly. And that's in addition to the other gifts that you can make. So as you can see, the idea is to, as long as you can afford it, to go ahead and reduce the value of your estate so that upon your demise, your estate is lower and hence estate taxes are lower.
Yeah, because the income tax deduction for medical expenses, you've got that 7.5% of adjusted gross income limitation. So a lot of people can't pay their medical expenses and get tax deduction. So I guess that would be one way to help them, right?
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And I think what people miss, and the reason I include it on year-end planning is that now we're starting to we have 4 kids, 2 of them are in college, so I'm very aware of those bills coming in, and we're starting to get invoiced for next semester. And it's important that people pay it directly. You can't reimburse someone for that. So, for example, you have grandchildren. You want to help with your grandchildren's education. You can't pay the money to your child to reimburse them.
No, you have to pay it directly to
You
the
have to.
institution.
Oh, okay, so
Exactly.
that's the nuance.
Exactly. But it also is unlimited. So think again about how much you can get out of your estate, thereby eventually reducing estate tax.
Any plastic surgeries you need, Mark? I'll be glad to forward some. No, just kidding.
I forwarded this one to my dad.
Yeah.
Dad, you can pay for college
Yeah,
for my
exactly.
kids.
What's the idea about generation skipping tax planning or transfer tax planning? I hear that a lot, and I'm not really sure why is that a useful tool?
Well, the government is smart, despite what
Despite
it might
what we
seem.
all think, yeah.
Exactly. And they don't want people to transfer, large wealthy families to transfer wealth to grandchildren and let it skip the generation of their children for estate tax purposes, right? Because think about it,
Yeah.
if you could transfer an unlimited amount of money to grandchildren, then you could have a whole generation of children that there's no transfer tax due.
But in theory, couldn't you transfer to your kids and then eventually they transfer to their kids?
Yeah, but then it would be subject to estate tax when the children die. And they'd have the same limitations, right? Because you can't just leave an unlimited amount. You can leave the exclusion amount. You can make annual exclusion gifts. So if you did that, you left it to your kids would have the same restraint.
It almost sounds like the object is not to make a lot of money, just so you don't have to pay estate tax. But I know that's not the case.
Right.
So
right.
Generation skipping, it's not because your kids you think your kids are losers and you don't want to give it to them, you want to give it to their offspring.
I'm sure that comes into play.
I always think about that. I was like, why would you skip it and go straight to the grandchildren?
It's a good question. There's actually a lot of reason why you would. I mean, some of it might be you might not trust the children, but when we talk about generation skipping, it's a little deceiving because we're not talking about skipping the children completely. What we're often talking about is a trust for the children that passes to their children when they die. So are you following that?
That makes more sense.
Right,
Okay.
right. So that it's actually often a transfer tax benefit for doing that, but also protection. For example, let's say you said you had kids, Mark?
Yes.
And so your oldest is how old?
16.
16? Okay. Well, let's not say that your 16-year-old got married, but let's say that your
God
16, right, let's just say that when your kids grow up, they get married. If you leave everything outright to your children, where do you think your children's estate plan is going to leave your assets?
Well, hopefully to their children.
Kids.
Right, but
Or
what
the
usually
government.
happens? They're going to leave it to a spouse.
Oh, right,
Sure.
right. Oh,
And
got
if
it.
they should get divorced, then your money that you've worked so hard for has now been subject to your kids' estate plan that left it to a spouse instead of the children. So by creating a generation skipping trust, you can say, you can have this, you give it to your child in trust. You could even make your children the trustee of the trust.
And do they basically get the income?
They can even take the principal.
Oh, they can? Okay.
Sure, they can use it as they need for whatever they need it for, health, education, support, maintenance. But the key is that the grandparents' estate plan is what controls it, not the child's estate plan.
But if the children spend all the money,
If the children spend all the money, then they spend all the money.
Okay.
Then you might not make the children the trustee of the trust, if that's what you're worried
if
about.
you're worried about it, yeah, you should
Then
know
you-
ahead of time.
right.
In fact, my daughter's already picked out my wheelchair, so I got to be very
Right.
careful of
So
it.
the
Hopefully there's a
idea-
motor.
Right. Well, I heard that the longevity of your parents often determines how long you'll live. And so I've heard a lot of people starting to take much better care of their parents.
What if
once they learn-
one got hit by a bus? Does that matter? Okay.
Okay, that's a different story.
That's a different story.
But your question is really good about the generation skipping. So the idea is that there is a certain amount excluded from tax. There's actually, what people don't know, there's an additional tax when you leave money to grandchildren. But there's also an exclusion, meaning an amount that you can leave without that tax. We often refer to it as a GST exclusion. So what a GST trust does is up to the exclusion amount, it allows you to transfer an asset to your children, then provide upon their demise it goes to their children, and it could be free of transfer tax.
Like 5 easy ways to make sure your children wishes and assets stay protected should something happen to you. Tell us about that. What are you giving our listeners?
Right, so it's a free report with valuable information, including even links to a place where you can go to download the California statutory will form. My goal, and the reason
I'm sure that's fun reading.
That's right. But the reason I do so much speaking is I am so passionate about making sure that people are protected. We also handle a lot of probate, and I see the money that can be wasted when someone doesn't have proper planning, when it's so easy to plan. So we talk about 5 basic things that everyone should know, including if you don't have a lot of assets, download a statutory will form. Get yourself a guardian. Get yourself the basics. We recently had a probate that ended up going to distant relatives, one in Europe, one lived in the Midwest, just because he didn't have a current will with a live beneficiary.
And that's not what he intended, I'm sure.
No.
Okay, stay with us
No.
in the studio here, because when we come back from commercial break, we're going to get into email time and other interesting real estate and other economic stuff that's
Real
going
estate
on.
nuggets.
Real estate nuggets. Okay, here is our second trivia question as we go to commercial break. Again, the theme is the old TV show MASH, which, by the way, Harry Morgan just died.
Oh.
96 years old. Remember him? Okay.
Wow, he lived a long time.
He sure did. What was the name of the character who dressed in women's clothes trying to get a Section 8 to get out of the Army? And we will be right back. Welcome back to the Best of Investing. I'm Edward Brown, your host, along with Mark Hanf and Michelle Lerman today. And we cut to the second commercial break. Here is our trivia question. Again, the theme is the old TV show MASH. What was the name of the character who dressed in women's clothes trying to get a Section 8 to get out of the Army? And the answer is,
It's on the tip of my tongue.
okay, played by Jamie Farr,
Yeah.
Corporal Max Klinger.
Klinger. I kept wanting to say
Klinger.
Kramer.
Close.
You were close.
Darn it.
Very close. Okay, Mark, we have received an email for you from a listener with a very good question, actually, because Mark does hard money loans, and I know you'll get into that with the audience here. If a loan comes due and the borrower cannot pay it off, do you automatically foreclose, or will you extend the loan? That's a great question.
That is a great question. And, you know, the hard money lending industry it has such a bad rap, but I think that is because most of the public thinks of hard money as hard money, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. It's really, we even changed the name of the industry in the last few years. We call ourselves private money lenders as opposed to hard money lenders. It's part of it is because I think it's a kind of a softer, easier, more PC name, but also it kind of, I think it recognizes the fact that it's really a different industry. The industry has grown and blossomed and thrived in the last several years as a result of the fact that the banks really stopped making a lot of types of loans. I mean, after we had the financial crisis in October of 2008, as a result of that, banks have become very, very reluctant to make certain types of loans. For example, they're not making many loans to real estate investors. We remember in 2005 that you could buy real estate. All you had to do was be able to fog a mirror and state your loan as being, I make $250,000 a year, even if you made $30,000 a year, and you could buy property all over California, and a lot of us did that.
And the hard money lenders back then would be gunning for the property potentially.
Right.
And of course, if you want a softer name, you could call yourself Powder Puff Loan Company.
But anyway, so yes, we're private money lenders, formerly known as hard money lenders. We make short-term loans, generally secured by non-owner occupied real estate, and short-term meaning maybe 12, 24 months. The idea is it's usually, some people call it like a bridge loan. The idea is, hey, I need a short-term loan to bridge the gap between now and an event that I think is going to happen in the future when I'll be able to pay it off, maybe with bank financing, or I'm going to sell the property, I'm going to flip it. But we did make a number of loans 2 years ago that were 24-month loans, and the loans have matured. And so the question is do we automatically foreclose on those loans, on those properties when they mature? And the answer is no, of course not. Really, most of my investors, and I use private money, private individuals in the Bay Area are the funding sources for our real estate secured loans. I might add they're getting a very nice return for funding that. They are getting fixed rates return generally between 8 and 10% for investing in these notes secured by generally rental property, for example. There's a lot of residential 1 through 4 property.
Yeah, and if the borrower's still paying,
well, that's
where
just
else are
it.
they going to get 8
Right.
to 10%?
Right. So you've got a good borrower. He's made his payments on time every month. They get usually before the 10th of the month. They're making their rent payments, or the interest payments on that loan. And so we have not had a problem getting most of our lenders to agree to extend. Now, what if the lender does not want to extend? Well, then I've got an opportunity to maybe make a new loan to that borrower. I can find someone to either assign that note to, or to renew that note, or to extend that note. There's many options, but generally speaking, I have found that the investors in our companies don't really want to foreclose on property. This is not what we call a loan-to-own situation.
No, and if you have other investors, maybe that one investor who took the note, he needs the money because of, let's say, his daughter's getting married or something like that. He doesn't necessarily want to foreclose either. He just wants his money out, and maybe you just find another investor to take it over, right?
Right, well, and that's exactly it. When it becomes a problem is if the property has gone down in value. Now that has even happened in the last several years. We've watched as some communities have fallen even since 2009, when many of us thought that was the bottom of the market. We've experienced this double dip, and in fact, the second dip has gone below the first dip in many markets.
But if the property's gone down in value, your investor definitely wouldn't want to foreclose, right?
Well, that's exactly right.
As long as the borrower's making the payments.
As long as the borrower's making the payments. And right now, the best play in real estate, in my opinion, in the Bay Area is rental property, is acquiring property for rental income, for a long-term hold. You certainly don't want to be buying property for appreciation today, and fixing and flipping, while it's very popular, and a lot of my borrower clients are in fact buying, fixing and flipping in the Bay Area, it is much more difficult than it was 5 years ago.
Absolutely. Well, Brian, our other co-host, he's been buying rental property.
Yeah.
At foreclosure.
Well, it's not for the faint of heart, and I've had clients borrow money from me to do a fix and flip and make no money because they didn't do their homework well enough. So it is something that you have to be careful of.
But your lenders didn't get
No.
hurt.
Our lenders don't get hurt because, again, that's the reason why we don't go higher than 65% of the purchase price. I don't care how good a deal a borrower tells me they're getting. So I'm buying this at wholesale. Can you make me a higher loan?
Everyone's buying wholesale.
If I'm getting the property for 65 cents on the dollar, does that mean at 65% you'll fund 100% of the purchase price? I get that question almost every day, and the answer is no, of course not, because you're not getting a property for 65 cents on the dollar. You're getting a good deal, but that's the retail price today.
Well, the other part is you want your borrower to have skin in the game. You don't want him to just throw his hands up and go, this didn't work, see you later.
Right, you don't want him to get halfway through the project, realize he's got cost overruns or problems, and walk away, leaving the lender holding the bag. Unfortunately, we have not had any of those situations happen. As we get loan requests and we underwrite the loan and we decide this is a good opportunity, I would put my money in it. So this is that's kind of the gauge we use if we feel safe and if we feel comfortable with the parameters of the loan as we underwrite it. We then distribute in an executive summary form that investment opportunity to those who are on our distribution list. So we're located in Marin County, and a lot of our clients live in Sonoma County, Marin, and San Francisco. Actually, they are all over the Bay Area who have called or emailed us and said, hey, please put me on your distribution list for trust deed secured note investments. And
those, you're not limited to those 100 clients.
No.
Sometimes there might be people who say, I only want something in San Francisco, or I don't want anything in San Francisco.
Well, 100 sounds like a lot, but they're liquid at different times, and they're looking for different types of clients. So there's, I welcome anyone to for more information, to go to our website at pacificprivatemoney.com and read about trust deed investments, because you can make easily, it's just so easy to make 8, 9, 10% fixed interest on your savings. Interest is paid monthly. The notes are short term. It's six months, 12 months, 24 months. You choose how comfortable you are going out. I've got some investors that say, hey, you got any 5-year notes out there? I want to lock my money up at 10% for 5 years.
Well, the thing I like about it is that if you invest in it, you know exactly what you're getting. When people say, well, I don't know what the risks are, well, it's not rocket science. Here's the risk, that the properties go way, way, way down in value, even more, and you can't get your money out when you sell the property if you have to foreclose.
Right. Right. Property values would have to go down another 25% for the types of loans that we do to really be in any kind of jeopardy, in my opinion. And I don't know anyone who's predicting in this market that that's a likelihood. I think that's very unlikely. I think most of the air has been let out of the tire. I think we're near the bottom, if not at the bottom. And
even if you don't expect a huge appreciation, you don't necessarily have that much extra risk.
But even still, we're not doing 80% loans. 65% is the max, and a lot of loans we do are quite a bit less. I'm looking at a loan right now in San Francisco that's 50% loan to value. That is not a difficult decision to make in terms of security.
All right.
We've always gone out and actually looked at the property if ever we were going to invest.
Most of our lender clients do, absolutely.
Right. You'd say, okay, would I want to own this?
Yes.
Right. Would I want to own this?
Okay, we're going to cut to our third and final trivia question at the commercial break here. Again, the theme is the old TV show MASH. Before B.J. Honeycutt joined the show, who was Hawkeye's sidekick who shared his tent? We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Best of Investing. I'm Edward Brown, your host, along with Mark Haunt, the famous private money lender from Pacific Private Money, and Michelle Lerman of Lerman Law Partners. And when we cut to the third and final commercial break, we asked this trivia question. Again, the theme is the old TV show MASH. Before B.J. Honeycutt joined the show, who was Hawkeye's sidekick who shared his tent? Now, Mark, you said you know this answer.
That would be Trapper John.
Trapper John McIntyre. Very good. Okay, Mark, let's talk about today. What is going on in real estate today?
Well, it's the end of the year, and we've been on for a year and a half, and just about every show, Edward, we talk about real estate and the direction the market's heading. And so, of course, as I'm doing some show prep, I'm looking at the blog posts and reports. And this week we had the release of the October Pending Home Sales Index. And what that is, pending home sales are basically new contracts, what properties got into new contracts, and that's actually a forward-looking statistic, so that's important. In fact, in my opinion, it's more important than how many units were sold last month. Now, if you listen to last week's show, we talked about how the sales for September were down year over year, not by a lot, but down, not up, and how this fourth quarter, at least in the eyes of a lot of real estate agents, have been pretty disappointing. Unit sales have not gone where a lot of people thought they were going to go. So here the October Pending Home Sales Index comes out, and it says, well, pending home sales are up, and that's good news. But I also know that there's something happening in the market, and this was another report that I read this actually comes from CNBC, and it's the fact that realtors are reporting higher cancellations, and that this cancellation rate right now in home sales contracts is 20%, and that's that's an all-time high. And
what are they saying? What is attributing it?
Well, they're at first guess you might say, well, it's maybe because people aren't getting the financing, but as it turns out, that only accounts for about 10% of the cancellations apparently. And the bigger issues are things like failed inspections, and the biggest one really is buyers with cold feet and economic conditions.
Wondering, is it going to go down lower?
Right,
Yeah.
and
Bottom.
appraisal's not coming through. So we have this frustrating condition, and it's particularly frustrating if you're buying, fixing, and flipping out there. I know that there is a lot of flippers out there that are sitting on inventory that's on the market, and they're wondering where the buyers are. So the prediction, so here we are. It's December. Not a lot of people are expecting a whole lot more to happen during the holidays. So we're all kind of looking forward to next year. Okay, what's going to happen in 2012? And usually the selling season generally accepted starts around after the Super Bowl. That's kind of like when the housing market picks up, and so we're saying, okay, well, spring and late winter, where are we going? And that's where everybody's crystal ball tends to differ a little bit. It's some people seem to think, well, we should stabilize and maybe even see a little improvement in the second half of 12, while others are going, maybe we're going to see a little bit more softening of prices. And I don't claim to have a clearer crystal ball than anyone else, but I do tend
Why do I have you as my co-host
then? But I do tend to, well, I just want to make that caveat, I'm not a guru, but I do tend to believe that I think we're at or near the bottom, and I do think the buyers will come out. I think there is some pent-up demand going on right here. I think the banks are going to start releasing more foreclosure inventory, which actually I think is going to be snapped up by investors who have been waiting for more inventory to come on the market. There's a lot of educational seminars going on out there telling people that there's never been a better time to buy rental property.
Well, interest rates are still pretty low, and the rental market is still pretty strong. But a question for you about the part about the inspections, because you said some of it has to do with inspections not passing, but that you could just adjust the price. I mean, it's not going to be a real surprise, let's say, to a seller, because any buyer who does an inspection is going to figure out if it's got termite damage or whatever, and it is what it is. I mean, the seller can't just say, well, just ignore that and keep the price high.
Well, you're talking about what they refer to as equity sales, not distress sales. Those are the sales by either someone who's fully repaired a property and is looking for market value, or somebody who is living in their home and needs to move, and it's not a distress sale. They just want to sell it for a fair market price. And it's very, very frustrating. They're competing with distressed sales, and since distressed sales make up nearly half of the sales each month in this current market, you're dealing with a mentality where people just, well, if you're asking 250, then I'm going to offer 225, and
Sure.
so an inspection comes in, and there's the inspector's paid to find something, and they usually do. So it's just I think it's a number of factors, but until we get out of this mindset that housing is continuing to drop, and I do believe it's a mindset. It's like the stock market. I think people's expectations make things so. I don't think it has
Sure.
anything to do, because it's not like we've seen a tsunami wave of new foreclosures on the market, and so
Not
it's-
yet.
Well,
You said the bank
yeah.
may be, but
Um,
one quick thing I wanted to bring up with
Yeah.
real estate here was something I thought was kind of interesting that I saw in the paper, that it seemed actually, in my opinion, that the city of Novato actually did something on the positive side, and that was it says the title was Fees Rejected for Commercial Developers. So basically, the city of Novato will likely not ask commercial developers to pay for affordable housing, at least not in the next few years. So what I took that to mean is that they realize that the developers just can't afford, because prices are so low, to pay these additional fees, but yet there's still a need for this commercial development. So it's kind of nice to see a city actually make a pro-development. type
Yeah,
of-
if you want to incentivize developers,
Yeah.
that's the thing. The fees have gotten way out of hand. That's absolutely sure. I just wanted to mention before the end of this segment, Michelle Norman's been our guest, and she's one of the best estate planning attorneys in the Bay Area. But your husband is Jeff Lerman, who we've had on as a guest, and he's the real estate investors attorney. And so you guys you're pretty involved in the real estate market yourselves. That's not-
Definitely,
so-
yeah, definitely.
Make sure that you tune in to the Best of Investing. On behalf of our team, I'm Edward Brown, wishing you the best of investing. So long.